Hey everyone, what's going on? Yesterday in the mainstream media, the major story was that Donald Trump made this historic visit to North Korea. He took 20 steps into North Korea, becoming the first acting president to visit North Korea. And what I'm going to show in this video is how this story is absolutely scripted. And if you're new to the channel, check out some links in the description. But every day our mainstream media is scripted with this old world practice that is called Gematria or Gematria. It is the practice of coding numbers into words and phrases, and it stems back to Jewish mysticism, which is called Kabbalah, that has a belief that God created the world by merging the letter with the number with the word. And Donald Trump understands this knowledge. Kim Jong-un understands this knowledge, and many of these people who are in high places understand this knowledge. They are using this knowledge to rule over the masses of the world and make you think that, Donald Trump is fighting the New World Order when really he's just part of it, and so on. So let's just look at this story and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Once again, check out the links in the description. You can learn how to apply this. It's very simple. A second grader could understand this. So the big deal was that Donald Trump took 20 steps. And in this practice of coding numbers into words and phrases, if you write out 20 steps, it just so happens to equal 42. And what else is interesting is that this meeting, it just so happens to come 4 months and 2 days, like 42, after their meeting that was in Vietnam that got cut short, if you remember, back on February 28th. So 4 months and 2 days later, and 20 steps equals 42. Also, if Vietnam just so happens to equal 42. And what else is interesting is that the South Korean president was there as well. Moon Jae-in. Moon Jae-in equals 42. Kim Jong-un equals 42 in Gematria. Yesterday was also the 181st day of the year. And the reason that this is so interesting, just want to point out June 30th, 181st day of the year. If you understand prime numbers, the 42nd prime number just so happens to be 181. 42nd prime number, 181. This comes 4 months and 2 days after their meeting in Vietnam that equals 42. Kim Jong-un equals 42, the South Korean president. Moon Jae-in just so happens to equal 42. Another story that we got that was coincided with this was that the new White House press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, got into a brawl with the North Korean officials and so on. And when you look her up, of course, she's 42 years old. That's why she was, in this story, she's 42 years old. Her last name equals 42. They made sure to tell us that she was bruised. Bruised equals 42. Brawl equals 20, which reminds me of 20 steps. Also, what was interesting is that if you read out an all-out brawl, that equals 82, just like if you read out Stephanie Grisham, right? Because they highlight this. That's how the media does it every single day. What else is interesting in regards to Stephanie Grisham is that if you go from the day of this story to August 11th, which is this big day that we've been mentioning for over a year now, because it is the Jewish holy remembrance of the destruction of the two temples called Tisha B'Av. And there's been a lot of symbolism in regards to Donald Trump and the wall, right? And he also visited the Western Wall that is in Jerusalem. And then the next day he went and met Pope Francis. Pope Francis is the first Jesuit pope. Donald Trump went to the Jesuit University, Fordham. And a while back I mentioned how North Korea had all of these connections synced up to the Jesuits. And, just think about a holy war and so on. And it's just interesting. This comes 42 days before this celebration of the remembrance of the two temples. And when you further look at Stephanie Grisham, it talks about how in 2015 she worked as a press coordinator for Pope Francis's visit to Philadelphia. And I'll leave some links in the description, but Philadelphia has been really important to this narrative with Tisha B'Av and the Third Temple and so on. Because in Philadelphia, there is a building called the Comcast Center that has a giant black cube on the top. And the black cube is supposedly representative of the New Jerusalem, which would have the Third Temple. Also, Pope Francis, when he visited the United States and went to Philadelphia, he left the United States from Philadelphia on the Jesuit anniversary of all days. And he's the first Jesuit Pope. If you write out press secretary, it also equals the same as Society of Jesus, which is the Jesuits. A few other interesting 42s are, if you write out World War, that equals 42. And if you just write out the word war equals 42. And a lot of this is seemingly pointing to not having a war, right, with Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. They're making it seem like there's not supposed to be a war, and they're trying to work it out, which possibly could happen, but it just seems like it's, that's not the way it's going to be. And Donald Trump, I've been saying since he was elected, is super connected to North Korea. He won the biggest election upset since the year 1948. And that election that in 1948, the biggest election upset was when Harry S. Truman upset Thomas E. Dewey. And notice Harry S. Truman equals 176 and 148. And look what happens when you write out Donald J. Trump. 148 and 176. It's the reflection of Harry S. Truman, which is interesting in regards to how it seems peaceful in the media with Kim Jong-un. The opposite of the Korean War. Harry S. Truman was the president during the Korean War. And, everything about Donald Trump and winning the election was about the number 48. Mike Pence became the 48th vice president. Donald Trump equals 48. He won the biggest election upset since the year 48. He won it on the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down, right? That's when they told us that he won the election. November 9th, the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down. Look at the word wall equals 48. We also got the closest supermoon since the year 1948, just days after Donald Trump was elected president. Or I should say selected as the president, because they already knew it was going to happen. They even released a movie just after he became the president called The Wall, and it came out on the 48th day of the year. And then LeBron James, they brought his game show back called The Wall or whatever. But, Wall 48, Donald Trump 48. The Indians had just lost in the World Series. Cleveland equals 48. And they haven't won a World Series since 1948. Notice Kim Jong-un also equals 48, right? So does World War. World War 48. That's why earlier this year, when Donald Trump addressed the nation about building the wall, he did it on January 8th, which was Kim Jong-un's birthday. It's no coincidence that he did it on that day. He did it on January 8th. That same day, we got a story just below the story about Donald Trump addressing the nation. We got a story about the wrestler Chris Jericho signing to a new wrestling league. Chris Jericho, of course, 48 years old, and he was born on November 9th, the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down. And think about his name, Jericho. Think about the walls of Jericho and how that is an important thing in regards to Donald Trump addressing the nation about building the wall. Another 48 is that North Korea was actually established in the year 1948. We'll just type out North Korea really quick. North Korea was established. Well, it doesn't say it on here anymore. Yeah, it does. Foundation of the DPRK, September 9th, 1948. So, right? So they were The Democratic People's Republic of Korea was even established on 9/9 of the year 1948. What else is interesting about today is that if you read out North Korea, or the day that the story came out, North Korea equals 55, and the date numerology just so happened to be 55 and 75. 6 plus 30 plus 19, that equals 55. If you add the 20 in there, it equals 75. And 75 is really important because Kim Jong-un just so happened to become the leader of North Korea on December 17th. Can't remember what year it was, but on that day, that's Pope Francis's birthday, December 17th, and it was his 75th birthday. And the reason that's so important is because if you read out World War III equals 75, and it also equals 69, which is interesting because they just told us that Stephanie Grisham, they announced that she would become the new press secretary, and she just so happened to become the press secretary, or announced it, on June 25th, which was the anniversary of the Korean War beginning. It was the 69th anniversary of the Korean War beginning. Look at World War III, 69. And then this new story about Trump going there comes on the date numerology of 75. According to Swiss records, if you look it up, Kim Jong-un's birthday is on 7/5. It's also 84 days before the Jesuit anniversary. Jesuit equals 84. And so on, right? I mean, a number of connections here. 7/5 is also the 186th day of the year, which is important, in the very beginning of the video. 20 steps equals 186. Pope Francis, his birthday is 186 days after Donald Trump's birthday. Donald Trump, you know, Pope Francis's 1,189th day of being the Pope was Donald Trump's birthday in 2016. And that's important because there's 1,189 chapters in the King James Bible. And in Jewish Gematria, if you write out Donald J. Trump, it equals 1,189. Think about how Pope Francis's 1,189th day of being the Pope was on that day. Pretty interesting. Also, another reason that Korea is connected to the Jesuits is a long time ago I noticed that the Korean War lasted 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days. A lot like a 312. And if you go from Kim Jong-un's, or from the Jesuit anniversary to Kim Jong-un's birthday, oh, my computer will work here, 1/8/2020, it just so happens to be 3 months and 12 days. And the Korean War lasted 3 years, 1 month, 2 days, a lot like 312. If you read out Pope Francis's name, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, that just so happens to equal 312. Also, in a different form of gematria that's not on here called Sumerian, where you take the alphabetic order and multiply it by 6, the word Pope equals 312. In history, the Jesuits were founded by Ignatius of Loyola and Francis Xavier, and I can't think of the other guy, but Francis Xavier, I believe he died on December 3rd, which in most parts of the world they rate the date as 3/12. And Ignatius of Loyola, he was made a saint on the date of March 12th, 3/12, this big number. It's important to the Jesuits, important to the Korean War, and so on. It's also why Dennis Rodman, when he went to Korea that one time and they had this big deal about his shirt saying pot coin on it, pot coin equals 312. And Dennis Rodman, super synced up to all of it, everything that was going on with it. I'll leave a video link in the description where I talk about the Great American Eclipse and why it was important to Moon Jae-in. I believe I talk about Dennis Rodman in that video as well. Also, we had the murder of Otto. It says Warm. His name looks like Warm Beer, but way back when that stories were coming out, they even showed how to pronounce it in the article on CNN, and it said his name was pronounced Worm beer. And then Dennis Rodman, the Worm, went there, and that's why he was released, supposedly, right? The Worm released Otto Worm beer, and so on. I know Otto Worm beer too. The last time that his parents had seen him was on December 29th, like a leap year, which it just makes me wonder about the last time that Donald Trump and Kim Jong Un had met, and then it got interrupted or it got canceled early, and there was no deal, and so on. It was on February 28th, which was like the last day of February. So I'm gonna leave the video there, I think, but I want to show you one more thing that's interesting. Way back when I was talking a lot about the Jesuits and the number 312, I was talking about Rihanna, which is interesting, and Barbados, and so on. And if you go to my recent posts, I know I haven't made very many videos lately, but if you go to my recent posts, I've been talking a whole lot about Rihanna and how there's something important with Rihanna again. And then, of course, we got this story about these two Americans that went missing in Barbados, which is where Rihanna is from. And she's from the parish of St. Michael. And the can't even say it. Arch, can't even say it. The Archangel Michael, there we go. That equals 312. Archangel Michael equals 312 in Gematria. But which also makes me wonder about the the Angels baseball player who just died today as well. And he died on 7/1. The word Catholic equals 71. That's also why North Korea is important to the Catholics. North Korea, it equals 145. Just like if you read out the word Catholic, equals 145. It also equals 71. Then we got this Angel player dying on 7/1. I haven't even taken the time to even remotely look at it, but now that I'm thinking about it, it's just interesting. We get an Angel player dying, and let me go back to this. I just want to show you what I'm talking about with Rihanna. Rihanna. I was talking about the Archangel Michael and how I was watching. Let me find it. I know I have a bunch of posts on here. The Archangel Michael 312, because she's from the parish of Saint Michael. There was a story about her that was 3 months and 12 days before, or her birthday was 3 months and 12 days before the story about her at Game 1 of the NBA Finals. I had this crazy synchronicity. I was watching the South Park or the Simpsons episode, the 312th episode of The Simpsons, and I knew there was something in this episode. Bart was watching South Park, and I looked up. Well, I can't even remember. I was looking up the 312th episode of South Park, but they don't have the 300. There's no 312. But I looked up season 3, episode 12, and I noticed it came out on my birthday, and it's the 43rd episode. And when I was watching the Simpsons episode, Bart says something about how I can't believe that South Park keeps it fresh after only 43 episodes. So that means in the 312th episode of The Simpsons, they're referencing the season 3, episode 12 of South Park, right? I hope that makes sense. But then later on in that Simpsons episode, they even bring up angels. The TV comes to this and it says everyday problems of angels. So I don't know. Now I'm starting to wonder if there's something synced up to that angel player, and I got to think about it more now. But I don't want to lose you. I was trying to make it real simple and short, but the moral of the story is I just wanted to point out I've been talking about Rihanna and how it's important to Barbados and so on, and then now we're getting all this stuff with Kim Jong Un again that is important to this number 312 with Rihanna. So I don't know what it is about Rihanna. There's something really important to it. We have the story about these two Americans dying on a jet ski in Barbados. I mean, how can people even believe this crap? Look at this picture. I mean, what, did this picture come from like 1970? Like they don't have any more updated pictures of these people from New Jersey that went missing in Barbados? I mean, come on. And what kind of name is that? Magdalena Devil? Like, Mary Magdalene and the devil? I mean, come on. It's just such a joke. And they do stupid stuff like this all the time. Like Roy Halladay dies just outside of Holiday, Florida, and Matt Harvey, the first pitcher to pitch in Houston after Hurricane Harvey. You know, just, oh, the odds. The story is about a jet ski that equals 43, New Jersey equals 43, Rihanna equals 43. I pointed out Jesus Christ equals 43 just because of this lady's name. So it's important. There's a bunch of stuff important to bridge symbolism. It was even 124 days after Rihanna's birthday. And Rihanna also equals 124, just like New Jersey. 220 was the southern number that I was talking about with that 312 connected to the Jesuits. And go figure that Donald John Trump equals 220, which is interesting. Donald John Trump, 220. Vladimir Putin equals 220. There was a whole bunch of 220 stuff a while back that I'll leave a video in the description as well, where I talked about Russia and Donald Trump and the number 220. The 220th Pope is the Pope who, when the Jesuits began, it was the 220th Pope, and that's also the same Pope who fully excommunicated King Henry VIII after he married Catherine of Aragon, and her mother and father were the ones who financed Christopher Columbus, right? So there's a whole lot of stuff going on. Christopher Columbus, the Knights of Columbus, the Jesuits. So I'll look more into that. I'm making the video short, but I know there's something important to Rihanna and how it's synced up to this story. The South Park was really important too back in 2017 when I was talking about the priest symbolism and how the priest that I grew up with in my town who got busted for child molesting, his name was Father Howard Fitzgerald, and then like a week later we got a story about the USS Fitzgerald that whatever, can't remember what happened with the USS Fitzgerald, but it was all about the number 220. And Otto Warmbier was all about the number 220. So, and the reason I mention that because this date comes on 6/30, and the story about Father Howard Fitzgerald, the original one, came out on 6/30 as well. And everything about the priests in my town was all about the number 63. Pope Francis even kicked Father Howard out of the church later, less than a year after that, and Father Howard was 63 years old. And then the priest that I had named Father Paul, who died in a bathtub at the Jesuit University at Creighton, he died like 6 months and 3 days after the Jesuit anniversary at the age of 63, I believe it was. And I think his name equaled 63. And another priest I had, he was born on the 63rd day of the year. Bunch of stuff. So, like I said, I'm going to stop rambling, but I know that is important. So, have a good one. Peace.